folks, welcome to the second installment of Move. Now, this is a bit of a mighty presentation, so I'm going to run through things pretty quickly because I don't want you to get bored and I want you to watch the full lecture. So, aims, quick facts about the female hormones, both physiological and psychologically. Supplements which might benefit you. I realise this is a Move section and not a nutrition section, however, supplements I'm just chucked in there as a bonus. I'm going to discuss the contraceptive pill, menopause, and that's everything. Okay, let's go into it then. So, when my clicker actually works, that would be helpful. Okay, so our hormones, estrogen. Estrogen generally has a bad reputation, and the reason it has a bad reputation is because if a male has too much estrogen, it can be bad for them. However, a female, estrogen is our testosterone. Estrogen is literally an awesome hormone. It does a lot for us. It's anabolic, so it helps us grow muscle. So when you guys say to me, I want muscle tone, it essentially means you want to grow your muscles. Estrogen helps you do that. It decreases appetite and it actually increases fat burning. So estrogen, yes, good. Progesterone. Progesterone is our other dominant hormone. Progesterone is what is responsible for our PMS symptoms, essentially. So when we are due on our period, it's progesterone that spikes, our estrogen drops, and it causes these things: increases in hunger, increases in cravings for sugar. And research shows it gives us a slight insulin resistance, so that's our ability to deal with sugars. It's pretty evil. So they're the two main hormones that we have, and I'm going to tell you the phases. So the follicular phase is menstruation. So the follicles in the ovaries mature and this phase ends with ovulation. So the follicular phase, in general, our estrogen is relatively high. Then we move into the luteal phase. This occurs after ovulation. This is when you are due on your period and it's just before your period starts. And this is when progesterone is high. This is what our hormone profile generally looks like. A male's hormonal profile would generally be 3 straight lines. Well, 1 straight line of testosterone. So, when you are suffering with PMS symptoms, show any male that is complaining about your PMS symptoms this profile and say, look, this is what is happening to my body right now. You got straight lines. I got them all over the place. This is what I want you to show them. No, but seriously, there is a real reason that you suffer with PMS symptoms if you do suffer with them. And that is because your hormonal profile does fluctuate massively and it does affect the scales. Obviously, Joe's covering that as well in the nutrition section. So I'm going to chat you through the phases. Phase 1 to 7. So this is when you're actually bleeding. So this is based on a 28-day cycle. You might have a shorter cycle. My cycle is generally 23 days. If you don't know how long your cycle is, I would highly recommend that you actually track your cycle, but I will be going into that anyway. So when you are at the beginning of your phases, phase 1, which starts with you bleeding, estrogen is at its lowest. You might get possible cramps, heavy bleeding, pain. Emotions might be unpredictable. Energy levels can be low, fatigue could set in. You might have a lower motivation to train, and you might need to sleep more. You could get an increase in appetite, however, this is person dependent. And what you'll see throughout this full thing is that most of these things are person dependent. You literally cannot compare 2 females, which is why there is such limited research on females, because we are so individual, so completely different. It's hard to study us. So training implications for phase 1 is literally, it depends. If you are somebody that really suffers when you are actually bleeding, you might need to have a slower paced form of exercise, like yoga, or simply walking. However, you might not be phased in this phase. When I actually bleed, I feel fine. The phase leading up to me bleeding, that's when I feel at my lowest and my tiredest. But when I actually bleed, I tend to get a bit more of a surge of energy, particularly after day 1. So my training resumes back to normal. But that is me, and that is what I'm aware of, and that is what I need. You should know what you need. So start paying attention to your body and how you feel when you are going through these phases. And then you can determine whether you can exercise or not. All I would say is try and involve some form of movement in this phase. Getting out and about and going for a little walk when you are going through this bleeding phase will help your PMS symptoms. Exercise has proven to help that. If you are somebody who really, really suffers and you have very heavy periods though, you might need to just stay at home and do nothing. So phase 2, days 7 to 15, this is probably the best phase. So our awesome hormone estrogen starts to peak, and if you have a natural cycle, your testosterone starts to peak as well. We only get that little bump. If you have a little look at that green line there, that is our little bump, and this occurs after bleeding. So bleeding ends, this is our feel-good phase. We can often see a huge increase in mood, motivation and competitiveness can peak, and you can sometimes feel that little bit stronger, just generally because you have more energy. It's not because you are stronger. I guess testosterone can help with that, but it's mainly down to energy. Similarly, when you are going through your bleeding phase, you might feel weaker. It doesn't mean you are weaker, but you might feel it because you are generally fatigued. So training implications. It would be a very good idea to take advantage of this particular phase by doing maybe some heavier training patterns. So maybe in this particular week you train a little bit more. You could literally spread out your training regime across a month, and you could do 4 days a week in this particular phase, 3 days a week in the next, 1 day in the next, 1 day in the next. As long as your normal training pattern works out at the same volume, you could do it that way. So utilize this phase with maybe timed workouts, challenges, PBs, 1-rep maxes, just doing more difficult forms of exercise, because your body literally will be able to cope with it a lot better. Phase 3, 15 to 22 days. Ovulation and mating phase. So this is still a bit of a feel-good phase. So your mood stays elevated. Feel-good factor is still present. You'll probably feel a little bit sexier in this phase as well. Libido and confidence is increased. However, towards the end of this phase, testosterone starts to drop and progesterone starts to increase, and we move into phase 4. So, training implications. At the start of this phase, you might feel more confident and energetic due to the increase in estrogen, so it could replicate similarly to the phase before, where you utilise the 1-rep maxes, the heavy training regime. You might up the load. You might do more frequent training, so instead of only training once a week that week, you might train 3, 4, 5 times, because like I say, your body can deal with it, and this is a similar phase. However, towards the end of this phase, you may start to feel a little bit more tired. You might start to report lack of progress and feelings of negativity. And this is due to the drop in the feel-good hormones and the start of phase 4. Phase 4 is the nasty phase. It's worth preempting this. Knowing your body at this stage and knowing the physical changes you might go through, like water retention, bloating and fatigue, can help you, because if you can expect to wake up feeling the way you're feeling, it's a lot easier to deal with. Okay, so final phase. All hormones start to plummet. It's the main onset of PMS. So this is the 1 or 2 weeks before, well, it's more like a few days or up to a week before you bleed. You can experience bloating, breast soreness, water retention, unstable emotions, onset of fatigue, desire to nest and stay at home and be unsociable, more negative, you might feel a little bit weaker and your temperature might be higher. So training implications, you might need to deload. So if you do suffer with PMS and you know that the worst thing you can do is try and exercise, then don't. Give yourself permission to take a step back and know that it's okay. You might want to introduce low levels or deload, as we say, where you go to the gym less and you do the same routine that you might always do, but you lift a little bit lighter. You give yourself more recovery. You might be somebody that needs to completely stop training, similarly to phase 1, but pay attention to your body. I certainly suffer, but I don't suffer every month. And I'm aware of myself when I am suffering and I know exactly what I need. And I'll generally do lighter, higher rep work, or I'll do Pilates, or I'll make sure I get my steps up that week and I don't necessarily worry about the gym as much. But that's not every month. Some months I barely feel it and I can just continue as normal. So, increase vitamin D at this time as well and encourage some time outside. So, as I discussed earlier, tracking your cycle. Very important. It's worth knowing exactly what you go through. There are various forms of apps that you can download where you can record day to day your emotions, your physical changes, your appetite, your energy levels, your performance in the gym. Track your cycle each month for at least 3 or 4 months so that you can deal with, or you can have a better expectation of what's to come. So depending on your cycle, you'll be able to track when you're at your strongest, when you're at your weakest, and when you need the most rest. And that's how you can adapt your exercise regime around your cycle. Never have low expectations of yourself at this time. Instead, plan around them to bring about a more positive effect. Just because an Instagram influencer is talking about their periods and how horrific it is and that they need to rest up and eat loads of chocolate doesn't mean that's what you need to do. You are an individual and your cycle will be completely different to somebody else's. Be wary of the self-fulfilling prophecy. Because you had a bad period last month, you will have another one this month. Not necessarily. That doesn't happen to everybody. You are going to feel fatigued. If you tell yourself you are going to feel fatigued, you will be. I'm not going to want to train. If you tell yourself you're not going to want to train, you're not going to train. You're going to be weak. All of these things that you tell yourself you will live up to. So stop. Track your cycle, have a better understanding of your body, and you'll be able to adapt and continue to exercise on some level if you're feeling well enough to do so. So, work your training around your cycle. If you are heavily affected by your cycle every month, work closely with a coach or adapt your workload to suit your phases. Take advantage of your good weeks and front load your training. So as I say, a front loaded training regime might be 5 days a week in phase 2, 4 days a week in phase 3, 1 day a week in phase 4, 2 days a week in phase 1. That could be how your cycle looks in terms of exercise. Then you're taking the pressure away from yourself, however you've got a plan. Be mindful of bad weeks and work on deloads and more mindful exercises and manage your stress as best you can. So supplements that might help you, Vitex or Chaste Berry. It's all herbal, but it's basically shown to help regulate your prolactin levels and progesterone levels to help manage your PMS. Vitamin D and B vitamins, so B12 and B6. Okay, contraception pill. Periods while on the pill are usually lighter and much shorter. Hunger pangs, emotional instability, and generally more symptoms of the menstrual cycle aren't as apparent, but still do occur. The pill is often prescribed to alleviate symptoms of PMS. It kind of keeps your hormones at a constant level. So where you saw the graph where we're kind of all over the place, contraception pill would kind of just keep things at a little bit more of a level for you, so you don't necessarily experience as bad of a time. However, you also don't get the surge in estrogen, you don't get the surge in testosterone. So as much as the lows might not be as low, the highs aren't as high either. So it's kind of what you decide on. I have no preference to this, because if you're on the contraception pill, as much as you might not be able to take advantage of like full energy stores, estrogen, testosterone, you also probably don't need to plan as heavy a deload phase, for instance. However, when you've got a natural cycle, you might get the benefits of those highs, but then in your low period, you might have to deload your training. So there's a bit of a trade-off there, either one. I'm not against or for. It's a personal choice. So far, there is no research that suggests it's bad for performance or on exercise at all. There are some hormonal pills that might increase your hunger. So generally, the progesterone-dominant pills have been shown to increase hunger. And I think, although don't quote me, the implant might actually do that as well. But it doesn't cause fat gain. That's important for me to say. But some of the pills might cause hunger, an increase in hunger. Okay, so last section, menopause. Menopause does not cause you to gain weight. It might feel like it does, but it doesn't. However, what it does do, it does make some changes, some significant changes that makes life a lot harder, dieting a lot harder, sometimes training a lot harder. It's essentially phase 4 of your menstrual cycle that lasts a lot longer. Be aware of the loudest voice though. People that talk about menopause, again on Instagram, they can make it sound like it's impossible to get results when you're going through the menopause or have been through the menopause, and it just isn't the case. So the changes that occur is you essentially stop producing estrogen and progesterone in order to stop the production of eggs. Now what this can cause: hot flushes, night sweats, poor sleep, low mood. So less estrogen means a reduction in serotonin levels. So because of all these factors, it's not surprising that dieting and training can become harder. So it's not that menopause inherently makes you gain weight. However, it does throw more obstacles at you that you now have to deal with and adapt around. And that is why menopause can feel like things are 10 times harder for you. They are in some respects. I'm not taking that away from people at all. You have a lot more to deal with when you go through menopause. It's going to happen to me. It's going to happen to you guys. If you're watching this and you haven't been through it already, it will make life harder. But again, it's having that knowledge so that you can make the empowered decision to help yourself through that. So the reason you might feel like you gain weight when you are going through the menopause is because the lack of estrogen causes a redistribution of body fat. So more fat is stored centrally. So this is why a lot of women assume they've gained weight, because what actually happens is your fat moves. So where generally females store fat across their thighs and bum, as they move around, that fat starts to move onto their midsection. So it makes people feel like they've gained weight, and where they've never carried fat around their tummy before, they now do. However, the benefits of exercise. There are huge benefits to resistance training, so specifically weight training for people who are going through or have been through the menopause. So, low estrogen can result in muscle atrophy, which basically means muscle wastage and bone wastage. So because of the lack of estrogen, that can happen. However, it doesn't happen if you weight train. So if you're watching this and you've been through the menopause or are going through the menopause, I would highly recommend that you start weight training, because it will change your health on a huge level. Lots of research tells us that the major negative effects of aging are directly linked to inactivity. Read that again. All of the research, or a lot of it, is telling us that the majority, or the major negative impact of aging is directly linked to being inactive. Another reason exercise should be forming part of your lifestyle. Even walking has a huge impact on aging. That is your seminar, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. A little bit longer than I planned, apologies, but there's a lot of information to cover. If you have any questions on this at all, then please use the group. I would like to set you a little bit of a task, and it's not something that you have to show in the support group. However, I would like you, if you haven't already, to start tracking your cycle. So download an app, use the health app on an iPhone, start tracking your cycle from today and recognize what your body is going through when you're feeling good, so that you can adapt your exercise regime around it so that you can continue to get results. Thank you, guys.